To discuss it all, CBS News senior political editor Steve Chaggaris joins us from Washington. Good to see you, Steve.
Great to see you.
All right, so Prime Minister Theresa May watched that back and forth play out between President Trump and his Mexican counterpart yesterday. So how do you think that will inform her handling of today's meeting at the White House?
Well, there's a bit of a different context here. I think, first of all, there's very little animosity between Britain and the United States at this point, not like what's going on between Trump and Mexico. And May wants to try to build a relationship with the new president. She's looking for maybe perhaps a trade deal as Britain exits the European Union with Brexit coming up. There's possibility that they're looking for a unilateral trade deal with the U.S. So she's coming really to sort of reach out to Trump as the new president. Also, what's interesting is that a lot of world leaders are watching this meeting to sort of see how things go, how a close ally of the United States meets with really an unknown quantity on the world stage, Donald Trump.
So, Steve, President Trump is going to be speaking by phone tomorrow with Russian President Vladimir Putin, and Prime Minister May offered up some advice for dealing with Putin in her remarks yesterday, urging the U.S. to engage but beware. What do you make of that phrasing?
Well, it's pretty consistent with what everybody seems to be saying about dealing with Russia. I think there are people in the United States, including Republicans, who are saying similar things. I don't think anybody is out there saying don't talk to Putin and don't try to build a relationship or change the relationship with Russia. But you have to beware. You can't trust him. And so it's pretty consistent, again, with what he's hearing here in this country and what he's hearing from a lot of world leaders. So what comes out of this meeting, if she can break through that idea that Trump is perhaps a little too friendly with Putin, it'll be interesting to see. But it'll also be interesting to see how Trump deals with Putin as this goes along. He may have this idea that he can build or mend the relationship with Russia early on, but as others have tried to do this, they've seen it's not as easy to do as it is to say.
Steve, I also want to get your take on an interview the president's chief strategist, Steve Bannon, gave to the New York Times, in which he said this, quote, "The media should be embarrassed and humiliated and keep its mouth shut and just listen for a while." He went on to call the media the opposition party. I want to get your take on that.
Well, it's a lot more aggressive than what others have said about the media, at least those that have been criticizing us, telling us to keep our mouths shut. I don't think the media is going to listen to Steve Bannon in terms of taking that advice. However, as I've pointed out repeatedly, it's a pretty non-risky strategy for Republicans to criticize the media. We are not held in high regard by Americans right now, and so beating up on us, again, is a political strategy that they feel is going to work. Now, that is going to make our jobs a little bit more difficult, of course, because we now have to work hard to prove ourselves again, continue to prove ourselves to the American people. But I just can't, I don't think that this is a point where we're going to sit here and take orders from Steve Bannon or Republicans. I think this is just going to cause journalists to work harder to tell the truth and to report out stories on this administration just as aggressively as we would have even if they weren't criticizing us.
Without fear.
Lastly,
Right.
Steve, you and Major Garrett are out with a new installment of the Takeout podcast. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so it's Major Garrett's podcast. I'm lucky enough to work with him on this. But it's called The Takeout. We talk politics and pop culture and food. We sit at a restaurant with newsmakers. This week we sat down with the head of the NFL Players Association prior to the Super Bowl next week, Dee Smith, who interestingly didn't just talk about football and his favorite football movies, but he talked about what he's watching in Washington with the Trump administration. And there's an issue, Obamacare, which he feels affects his players. He was pointing out that football players, they have a 100% injury rate. And they have a lot of pre-existing conditions after they retire, and a lot of them are on Obamacare. And so they're watching very, very closely what Trump and the Republicans do regarding repealing Obamacare. It's a very interesting conversation.
You are getting interesting guests. You've had Corey Lewandowski, now you have Maurice Smith. What are the restaurants? How do you go about choosing which DC establishment? I'm trying to be thinking of the way Major would think about food, which I know is very particular.
So Major and I and our producer Arden Fari eat lunch a lot at a Chinese restaurant literally a block away from the bureau here in Washington called Meiwa, and so they've been kind enough to host us the last couple of episodes. Food is great if you want to go there, but I think we are going to try to branch out as we move forward. But for now, we're doing this at Meiwa.
Awesome. Our Steve Chaggaris in Washington. We appreciate the time and look forward to the podcast.
Thanks.